Just the other day, I was thinking back over the history of my own personal career, and I was remembering back to the early days. Back then, if I was looking at a log file, it invariably meant something was wrong. Boo! And we were looking in the log file to try to figure out what we could do to restore the issue or repair the system, bring it back online, and then hopefully prevent that situation in the future. Now, this definitely still happens in a big way to this very day. But over the last few years, there's been a big shift in the reasoning behind what we log, how we do the logging, and then how we collect and use the log information. Because there's a key principle at work in information security, and that is know what is normal. And log data, of course, shows us errors and problems, but as long as it also shows us normal interactions, then there is value there when it's not a trouble time. The only problem that we get ourselves into then is trying to figure out how to manage the massive amounts of log data that our various systems generate. Think about my Rosemary Manx site out there. I only had 2 instances running, but there are sites that AWS runs that have hundreds to thousands of instances that might be working collectively together. Just think of something like S3. So this amount of log data in all of these different locations begins approaching some of those big data concepts that you might hear people talking about. It could be highly volatile. There's definitely a lot of volume involved in it. It could be a lot of content. And then there's often a lot of variety, log data coming from different systems. In my environment, I have the Apache log files, error and access. And then I also have all the system logs that come out of my operating system as well. This is all useful information, and I want to get it together somewhere that I can put it to work. The last few years, we've seen a big concept emerge called data lakes. And data lakes simply say, let's try to get as much of this info together, the goal being to collect and store it first. And then once you have it there, it's available for various analytic processing and visualization that can happen on top of it. So over the next couple of lessons, we're going to be digging into the data pipeline concepts of collect and store. So this is the first part where we have to go through and aggregate all the log data together in a common location and then keep it somewhere centrally accessible. And as you might imagine, a service at AWS that's going to be a great fit for this is the good old web accessible S3 buckets. By putting everything in S3, we can leverage the huge storage space that S3 offers and also all the centralized integration that so many other AWS products already have with S3. This is going to make it easier for us to go on to the other 2 parts of the data pipeline process. And that is the second phase, which is where we will go through and process the data. Now, processing implies that we want to take what we have, transform it, manipulate it, tally it up, filter parts of it out, and then produce a new data set from it that has more value. Now, in order to do that, you kind of need to know what you're looking for. And so this brings up a good time to consider the 3 big questions of logging. And that is, what do we want to log? What is the right detail level and the right system functions that should be captured and put into log files? The second big part of that was then, where do you log it? Now, there are ways to log directly to S3 or directly to some other system, or you could use agents to pull the log files out or write them to the local file system. The point is to consider the mechanism that you're going to deliver that data with. And then finally, the last thing we want to do is how do we put it to work? What is the information or the interval or the aggregation part of it that makes it useful for me and my teams? And of course, this is going to be totally situation specific. Often the best way to think of it is what is the final part that we want? And that is analyze or visualize. Okay. For many organizations, the goal is to put the information into a dashboard that the network operations team can look at throughout the day, like a health check report, and maybe they're just simple on or off alarm indicators that are in there, but it's driven by the log data. Or maybe in other situations, you're looking for specific events that you want to have displayed somewhere else, or maybe you just want to chart it out over time. The point is how you consume and use it ultimately drives why you would collect and store it, how you would process it, and then ultimately the visualizations that you want to create from it. Now, fortunately for me, my Rosemary Manx website is leveraging that very tasty Elastic Beanstalk managed service from AWS, which has some great logging utilities built into it. On top of that, in this lesson, we'll also take a look at how to log directly to S3 and then how to leverage something like CloudWatch Logs Agent and the CloudWatch Logs groups to help simplify some of that log shipping to export to S3 process.